So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Connecticut Voices for Children's Educational Disparities Dashboard webinar. My name is Ellen Shemitz, and I'm the Executive Director of Connecticut Voices for Children. With me today are Camara Stokes-Hudson, an Associate Policy Fellow at Voices, who is beginning the second year of a 2-year fellowship program, and Lauren Ruth, our Advocacy Director. Lauren has worked closely with Camara in the development of the data dashboard that is the subject of today's webinar. Before we jump into the data dashboard, we want to ground the presentation in the context of the rest of our work. As most of you know, Connecticut Voices for Children is a nonprofit, research-based child advocacy organization working to ensure that all Connecticut children have an equitable opportunity to achieve their full potential. We provide a research-informed, data-driven voice for Connecticut's children and families. Our policy work drives changes that build thriving children and families, equity and excellence in education from cradle to career, and inclusive economic growth and shared prosperity. We believe that the long-term social and economic well-being of our state depends upon inclusive economic growth that ensures pathways to opportunity for all of our children, youth, and families. By making a commitment to equity and opportunity, Connecticut can advance child and family well-being, improve our state's overall economic standing, and move forward towards a brighter future. I'd like to take a moment just to go over the agenda for today. We have a 4-part agenda for the webinar. First, we'll explain the origin of the data dashboard, that is, why we created it and how we hope it will advance race equity in education. Second, we'll walk you through the mechanics of the data dashboard, how to choose different data points, how to populate the map with the data, and how to find school district-specific data detail. Third, we'll discuss some of the many ways you might use this tool to raise your voices in support of a more equitable educational system in the state. And then for the final 15 minutes, we'll open up the conversation for your questions. Before handing this over to Camara to explain the dashboard, I do want to put this project in context and acknowledge the generous support of the William Casper Graustein Memorial Fund, which has made our work in educational equity possible. As many of you know, in 2015, the Graustein Memorial Fund adopted a new mission to achieve equity in education by working with those affected and inspiring all to end racism and poverty. Connecticut Voices for Children has been fortunate to enjoy program support from the Memorial Fund, enabling us to provide hard data on the reality of existing barriers to educational equity, to identify best practice policy solutions, and to advocate for these solutions as part of a broader strategic response to the economic and social challenges facing our state. We thank the Memorial Fund for its support of the data dashboard, a tool that we believe will, borrowing from the words of the fund itself, help individuals, groups, and organizations better understand the impact of racism on educational opportunity and empower them to move from understanding to action so as to drive the systems level changes necessary to build a more equitable future. And now we're just going to pause a moment and I'm going to hand this over to Camara.
Thank you. As Ellen mentioned, Connecticut Voices for Children conceived of the Educational Disparities Dashboard as a way to bring increased attention to the existing disparities in educational access and outcomes, empowering advocates, activists, and policymakers with data disaggregated by race ethnicity for each of Connecticut's 170 school districts. The work leading to this data dashboard began about a year ago with more than 30 interviews with racial justice and education advocates and organizers around the state. We asked them about the type of research and data they needed to help improve the educational opportunity for students of color and to reduce the disparities between students of color and white students. One constant theme in the interviews was the need for school district level data relating to race equity, data that would allow advocates and community members to quantify and highlight the specific problems in their schools, to identify systemic disparities faced by children of color in Connecticut, and to identify school districts that may have found promising practices to address such disparities. In order to meet this need, We recognize that we would need to communicate the data in a variety of ways to ensure that the underlying information was accessible to all and reached as many interested individuals as possible. As a result, we developed three different projects. First, a series of data walks. That is an interactive presentation where we share data related to educational disparities with advocates, families, and community members seeking their reactions, policy suggestions, and feedback. Second, two research papers taking a deeper look at the educational disparities between Black and white students in Connecticut schools and Latino and white students. And third, the Educational Disparities Dashboard, which we are discussing today. The report on educational disparities between Black and white students is available on our website. The report on educational disparities between Latino and white students will be released soon. So, what is the data dashboard? Basically, it is a series of interactive maps that display data at the level of individual school districts. Within a series of data visualizations using Tableau Public software, users are able to explore local disparities across several key issues key to educational success, including student enrollment, chronic absenteeism, per pupil funding, teacher diversity, exclusionary discipline, and student achievement outcomes, all of which are disaggregated by race ethnicity. In order to show the power of the mapping software, we are now going to switch from the PowerPoint slide to a live web browser demonstration. As we do so, we will walk you through how you would access this online data on your own. Changing the screens will take a moment, and I thank you for your patience during this time. First, to access the dashboard, go to the Connecticut Voices for Children homepage at ctvoices.org and click on the box in the right-hand column labeled Tableau. This will take you to a landing page of all of our interactive tools, like this. The landing page contains a number of other visualizations that Voices has created in the past, but today we will be going directly to the Education Disparities Dashboard. When you first choose the Educational Disparities Dashboard, you will land on an introduction page. This page includes directions on how to navigate the dashboard, as well as suggestions regarding ways in which you can use the information provided. From the introduction page, and indeed from any page in the dashboard, you can choose to look at data in one of the 6 key issue areas shown at the tabs at the top of the page. To choose a subject area, click on one of the boxes. For now, we'll click on the Enrollment tab. Doing so will bring you to a page with data regarding student enrollment in the state. This page, like all of the landing pages for the 6 issue areas, is divided into 3 sections. On the far left, you will see a definition of the data, an explanation of its significance, and a statement of the statewide averages for each set of data broken out by race. In the middle, you will see a map of Connecticut with school district boundaries. It should be noted that school district boundaries and town boundaries are not necessarily the same. There are some towns that are not represented on this map because they are in regional unified school districts. On the far right, you can see a drop-down list that allows you to choose which data you would like to map. For some of the sections, such as enrollment, data is available for one measure only, broken down by race. For other maps, particularly exclusionary discipline and educational outcomes, you can choose from a number of different data points. To demonstrate, we will now navigate to the Subject tab for exclusionary discipline. On this map, when you go to the drop-down list in the far right, you can choose from a number of different data points disaggregated by race. As you can see from the screen, the map provides data on suspensions, expulsions, referrals to law enforcement, and in-school arrests. After you have decided what data to display, you must move your cursor back to the middle of the page and hover over the map itself to populate the data for a specific school district. As you can see, the map is now covered with different size circles. There's one circle per school district. Differences in the size of each circle reflect differences in the scale. For example, if you hover over the town of Waterbury, you can see that 26% of Black students were suspended in the 2016-2017 school year. Waterbury has a larger circle than, say, Westport. I am pretty sure that that's Westport. I cannot see from our direction, but where only 6% of Black students were suspended. The smaller, tiny dots can represent one of two things. Either there are 0 students in that specific category, or the data is suppressed, which hides the data if the number of students is above 0 but under 6. SDE will not report this data because when numbers of children in a group are too small, individual children may be more identifiable. Data suppression is a tool to help protect students' privacy. The use of circles, as opposed to other possible visualizations of this data, allows us to represent true zeros and unavailable data. Please note that underneath the drop-down list, there is a legend which provides you with a reference point for the size of the dots you are seeing on the map. In the exclusionary discipline maps, unlike any of the other maps, we have 2 different scales. This is because while we measure suspension rates by percent, we measure all other exclusionary discipline data by rate per 1,000 students. And rates and percent scales are displayed differently on the maps. If you would like to view the data for a particular school district, but are not certain of that district's exact location on a map, you may use the search function at the top left-hand corner in the middle section. Simply hover your cursor over the magnifying glass icon and left-click. The text box will appear, allowing you to type in a town or school district name. Please note that you may need to choose among a number of same locations in different states and countries. So I will look for New Haven. We're looking for New Haven, Connecticut. And it zooms in on New Haven. To zoom back out, simply choose the minus sign located in the search function box. If you are looking for a regional school district, but don't know its exact location, unfortunately, Tableau doesn't allow you to search for them using the search tool like you would with a school district that's attached to a town. So you can locate them by searching for one of the towns inside of that regional district, and it will zoom in on the approximate area. I will now turn it over to our Advocacy Director, Lauren Ruth, to talk about some of the recommended uses of the dashboard, which include comparing race-ethnicity differences between a specific metric, comparing school district differences, and comparing multiple indicators within a school district.
Thank you, Kamara. To demonstrate the power of this data dashboard to compare racial and ethnic disparities, we will begin by comparing suspension data by race. To do so, we will now change our map from suspensions black to suspensions white. You will immediately see that across the state, the circles are much smaller than those on the map of suspensions for Black students. This suggests that across the board, white students are suspended less often than Black students in the same school districts and in the state overall. We can also use the dashboard to compare data points by place. To demonstrate how to make comparisons by place, we will now move to the Teacher Diversity tab. This map shows the percentage of teacher workforce that did not identify as white in the 2015-2016 school year, the most recent year for which this data is available. As you can see, overall rates of teachers of color are low, and no school district has a percentage of teachers of colors that is above 24%. Urban centers like Bridgeport, New Haven, and Greater Hartford have the highest percentages of teachers of color. Finally, this dashboard can be used to compare specific indicators like chronic absenteeism and enrollment for different demographics within a specific location. To demonstrate how to compare access and outcomes indicators within a specific district, we will now pull up the chronic absenteeism data. Under the chronic absenteeism tab, we will now choose the map for Latino students. The rates of chronic absenteeism are relatively high for Latino students in the Bridgeport School District. At a rate of 19%, Bridgeport's population of chronically absent Latino students is well above the statewide average for Latino students of 16%, and it dwarfs the statewide average for white students of 7%. We will now turn to the map with student enrollment data. Here, if we choose to map enrollment for Latino students, we find that Latino students make up the largest share of students in the Bridgeport School District, nearly half. This fact makes the elevated chronic absenteeism for Latino students in the district of heightened concern because it implies that not only are more Latino students in Bridgeport chronically absent than the state average, but a greater proportion of the student population overall in Bridgeport is chronically absent. Finally, before we move to the question and answer portion of this webinar, we would like to share two additional features of the data dashboard with you: the data appendix and the download functions. At the top of the page on the far right tab, you will see the data appendix. This page provides information on the data sources and answers some frequently asked questions about some of the choices that we made in the creation of the dashboard. Also on this page, as on all the dashboard pages, you can access additional functionalities. If you look at the bottom right of the dashboard, you will find directional arrows and 3 symbols. The symbol to the far right allows you to toggle in and out of the full screen. Next to that symbol is one that allows you to download specific maps or to download the data itself. Click on the download symbol. From here, you can select your file format. Now we are going to open the floor to questions and answers, which Ellen will moderate.
Thank you, Lauren. So as most of you know who have worked with this software before, you can type in your answers, your questions, and we will endeavor to answer them. I do want to mention that we are live streaming this event. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware that this will be captured and available on our website. There's already been one question that has been entered. The question is, will the data dashboard be disaggregated to individual schools, or is it not possible because of data suppression? And in order to answer that, I'm going to give that over to Camara.
Great. So the data dashboard is not currently disaggregated or broken down by individual schools, simply school districts. This is mainly done because it would just be hard to access that level of the granularity of data. It's the amount of kids that are likely to be represented, except for in very large schools, means that most of that data is going to be suppressed.
Thank you so much, Camara. While we're waiting for other questions, we have a few that were actually emailed to us. And so I want to try to answer those, but encourage you to please ask your questions as they come up. One question that we did receive has to do with race and ethnicity. Oh, I'm going to interrupt myself and say we hadn't seen some of the questions. So before I go to the emailed questions, let me jump into the ones that we're seeing on screen. This has to do with some of our data walks, I believe, asking about who the advocates are who were asked to participate. Let me give that to Camara.
Excellent, thank you very much. We talked to a wide range of people trying to encapsulate not only like current understandings in K through 12, but also racial justice advocates and other people working on education work. So we spoke to organizations like CT Core, CT Circle, which is an early care advocacy related organization. We talked to the CCA, we talked to a range of groups doing child advocacy organizing or education related organizing.
So our next question from the Fairfield County Community Foundation has to do with the type of mapping that we chose, and I want to give that to Lauren to respond to.
Thank you, Ellen. This question was whether Connecticut Voices believes a chloropleth map might be more visually engaging as opposed to the circles. I want to acknowledge that this was a question where we moved back and forth in how to answer it. It was not an easy question to answer, but there are two primary reasons why we chose to use the circles rather than a chloropleth map. The first being that the circles are more accessible for those with visual disabilities like color blindness. And the second answer is because within the circles, Tableau allowed us to show whether data represented a true zero or whether it represented suppressed data. And the chloropleth map did not allow us to show that data. And we thought it was really important information to establish that there are children in a district who experience a certain outcome or experience a certain access point as opposed to 0 children. I'm going to give this back to Ellen to keep answering more questions.
Sorry for the pauses, folks, between question and answers. We're sharing a microphone. So the next question has to do with the breakdown of the data and whether any of the information is available broken down by gender. And I'm looking to Camara and Lauren, and it looks as if Camara is going to take this one.
Great, Ellen, thank you. No, not any information right now is broken down by gender. It is quite difficult to access data that is both disaggregated by race and disaggregated by data, by gender, together.
So, Lauren, the next question has to do with what is different about this data and the data dashboard that may be available on either CT mirror visualizations or some of the CT data that's available on the portal that's been created by Governor Malloy and his administration. Can you respond to that?
Thank you, Ellen. This is a great question. So the CT Mirror and the Connecticut State Open Data Portal both are excellent data resources. What makes this data visualization different, first, is that it's particularly zooming in on race equity, as opposed to the Open State Data Portal, which provides a huge amount of data, but does not focus on a policy issue or how that data impacts very specific populations. And while the Connecticut Mirror has provided some excellent data visualizations over time, this really puts a lot of data that we had to specially request from SDE all into one place, all related to one issue of race equity. And this data connects to two different papers we wrote, as we mentioned at the outset, of disparities between Black and white children in Connecticut and disparities between Latino and white children in Connecticut, where those two white papers really go into the theory and national data and contextualize the state data and make very specific policy recommendations. So we expect that this particular data tool will help advocates within their communities, but we see this tool as working very much in tandem with our two white papers.
Camara, can I ask you to take the next question, which has to do really with the integrity of the data and how that we can verify that each district is inputting per pupil expenditures per school?
So the data that we used regarding per pupil expenditures is what is reported by SDE on what per pupil expenditures are. Outside of that, we don't really have much of another way to verify that that is exactly what's going on within school districts. But that is a question that should be asked of SDE regarding how the information is inputted into their data system as well.
Camara, one question that we did receive via email has to do with the choice of data where the school district level information is only related to Black, Latino, and white students, and we're only providing state level data with respect to some of other race and ethnic groups. Can you address that choice?
Yes. For the purpose of the data dashboard, we chose only to display deep dive data regarding Black, Latino, and white students because of data availability. We know that educational disparities in access and outcomes between white children and children of color exist, and we wanted to understand the depth and breadth of those disparities across the state as deeply as we could. Because of the number of children who identify as Asian, Pacific Islander, mixed race, or Native is so small in many school districts, a lot of data about these groups of students is suppressed. The purpose of suppressing this data is to protect the individual identity of children in school districts, which I mentioned before, with small populations of children from particular groups. For example, if a town only has 2 Native children enrolled in a school district and publicly posts smarter balanced test scores disaggregated by race ethnicity without suppressing the scores of those Native children, it would be fairly easy to guess how these particular individual students scored on a test. By understanding disparities for other racial and ethnic groups is an important question. Earlier in this legislative session, the Committee on Education in the Connecticut General Assembly had a public hearing to consider a bill that prohibited the State Department of Education from disaggregating education data by race ethnicity altogether. U.S. Census data shows that when Asian and Pacific Islander students' education data is disaggregated by ethnicity, not just race, educational outcomes are far better for Taiwanese and Asian Indian students than are for Hmong, Cambodian, and Lao students, many of whom are refugees of war and need more supports from their schools and communities. We hope to be able to find a grant that will allow us to take a deeper dive into educational disparities data for these smaller racial and ethnic populations in Connecticut.
Thank you, Camara. We have, I believe, just responding to Gail, who submitted a question via chat, my hope is that Camara's response just answered the issue of why we don't have data on the maps beyond Black, white, and Latino. If that's not the case, if we've not fully answered that question, please let us know in the chat box. While I have that out there, let me jump back to another question that's live. We have a question from Joanne about our plans to add data from past or future years and the ability to chart trends over time. And I'm going to ask Lauren to take that question.
Thank you for this question, Joanne. So the answer is I'm not entirely sure, because this was a big lift for us to be able to map this amount of data, and it would depend on ongoing support to be able to do this and to be able to update it every year. We are working on a project that will take much of this data and situate it within a larger context of our other work, such as health disparity work within the juvenile justice system, the fiscal systems. And so I expect that we will be updating the data as part of that project. But beyond that, I'm unable to answer the question further, and I apologize for that.
So we have a question about downloading the data, and I'm going to ask Camara, who really is responsible for the lion's share of this heavy lift of creating the dashboard, to take that one.
So to quickly answer that question, I am not sure why it's not allowing people to download the data as of right now. I am going to figure that out in the near future, and we will send an update once the data is downloadable as well. Right now, what you can do is download the PDFs and download the workbook itself, so that if you're also using Tableau, you can manipulate the data, and that will allow you to access the information as well that's inside of the dashboard.
I just want to assure you all the data was downloadable in an earlier iteration, so it's a technical glitch, and we apologize for that, but we will get that fixed. Let me just share another question that came out to us, again, via email, having to do with the choice of data and if we are able to include data on special education. And I didn't know, Lauren, if you might take that one.
Sure. So we found that there are a lot of limitations regarding the data available related to children with disabilities. Students with disabilities make up slightly less than 15% of the student population in Connecticut. And were we then to try and disaggregate the data on students with disabilities by race and ethnicity, as we do with other indicators in this data dashboard, we'd find a really great extent of data suppression. So take, for example, the New Fairfield School District. The New Fairfield School District has a Black student enrollment rate of 1%. So this is 27 students in the New Fairfield School District. STE reports that the New Fairfield School District has a 10% rate of students with disabilities. Using these data, we can estimate that New Fairfield likely has fewer than 6 Black students with disabilities. So this data would be suppressed for the sake of protecting individual students' privacy. However, we think this is a really important question. National data and research previously done at Voices have both shown that students with disabilities experience disparities in educational access and outcomes, and we think it's important, where possible, to look at this data through a deep dive methodology, even though it may mean that we are able to look at fewer school districts. We also think it would be important to explore access and outcomes for children whose primary language is not English, and we hope to pursue these projects if we can secure adequate funding.
So we notice from Gail that we didn't fully answer the question with respect to the districts where there aren't circles. Kamara, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So in some of the school districts, the dots are extremely small, and they might not be always perceptible, which is just a problem of the dashboard itself. But one of the other reasons that a lot of school districts might not have information regarding especially Black or Latino students is because, and I appreciate Adelie or Kofi for also answering this question as well in the comments, is because if the number of students that identify as a race ethnicity are below 20, SDE also suppresses that data. And so if you have a total population of students that's very, very small, it might not be that there are 0 Black students or 0 Latino students, it might just be that the number is under 20. But if you scroll over a school district, it should tell you if that data is suppressed, which means that either that metric is under 5 or that the overall population of those students are under 20, or if that number is a true 0, which means that the answer, like that no students were, Black students were suspended in that school district. There's also a question from Danielle Cooper about the teacher diversity tab. I have not seen that, but thank you for pointing that out. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah, so it looks as if we're going to have to change the font on that one particular screen, and we'll take care of that. And we really appreciate this is a new project for us, and so all of these comments and questions are really helpful in terms of making sure that we continue to improve it, even in terms of the visual display. So it looks like there are no open questions. One question that we actually discussed internally that we just want to make sure we share has to do with the treatment of magnet schools and charter schools. Kamara, if you could just address that before we wrap up, I would appreciate it.
In terms of magnet schools and the reporting of magnet schools, because magnet schools in Connecticut belong to specific school districts, the data for those schools is included within the average data reported for each of the school districts. For example, if you're interested in enrollment data about the Environment Magnet School in New Haven, that data is included within the data reported in the New Haven School District. Charter schools, on the other hand, are currently not included in our data set because they are treated as separate school districts in terms of SDE's data reporting. So it's very difficult for us to graphically represent them on maps. It would be quite confusing because there would be like 6 dots in New Haven, and it would be hard to tell which one is the New Haven School District and which is one of the various charter schools in the city.
Thank you so much. So I don't see another question, so I think we are going to wrap up, although certainly we encourage you all to email us with questions or to call us. We want to thank you for participating in the webinar. And again, we want to thank the Graustein Memorial Fund for its support, which made this project possible. All of our contact information is on the screen. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to Camara or Lauren, myself, or to Roger Sinceric, our communications director. We thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with all of you on these important issues. Thank you.